person and also District 1 Alderman. Let's go around the room and do a quick roll. We'll start with Nick.
Nick Dooms, Assistant City Engineer.
Sue Shill, City Attorney.
Paul Vollert, Public Works Superintendent.
Dean Veneman, Alderman, District 2.
Madeline Palmquist, Vice Chair.
Jeff Penscover, Alderman, District 4.
Dennis Pollock, Alderman, 6th Ward.
Matt Thacker, Mayor.
All right, thank you, everyone. We will call this meeting to order. Our first item of business, Review Engineering and Street Department Monthly Activity Report. We can kick it off with Street. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, the report is attached. Garbage collection is a little bit higher than previous years, and the recycling also is trending up. Here this last week, Monday, we started the 1 Mile Creek dredging project, which engineering has been working on, trying to get permits for a few years. Nothing too surprising that's happened there. Things are moving along fine. We're estimating that the project is going to take the whole month of January. Other things, lack of snow or a lot of snow, kind of doing some building maintenance and assisting the Parks Department with some projects. So those highlights, we had to do some rail maintenance out at the Rapids East Commerce by Metelco. We're assisting the Parks Department in making the Helen's House down at the zoo a 4-season building, as well as running sewer and water into a future project that they are proposing. I believe it's supposed to be an otter exhibit, if I remember correctly. We're also trimming the right-of-ways on the streets and our bike trails. We still have a few small things to complete on Lincoln Street. I'm waiting for a contractor to install the wire mesh on the railing in front of Quick Trip, and then we also kind of completed the section of bike trail from the Expressway Bridge down to the DOT, where we installed the new railing underneath the Expressway Bridge. The wire mesh has to be installed on that. I'm hoping that that's going to be completed by the end of next week. During the month of December, we did have two snow events that required us to plow the entire city, 7 additional events that required us just to salt the main arterials and the highways. So with that, we used about 300 yards of salt and 1,800 gallons of brine in pre-treating the roadways and then pre-treating the salt. Sign department continues to go around fixing damaged signs that happened during the storm events. We're also working on our painting equipment to be ready for the spring. We have, where is that? I think 9 of the 31 signs that were supposed to be installed for the overnight parking ordinance are left to do. The frost was just too deep to get those other signs installed. We're also doing our annual stop sign and yield sign replacements that no longer meet the reflectivity requirement. Our shop, thankfully, has been relatively quiet besides the maintenance work that consists every single month. We did have pretty significant damage to one of the salt trucks where it hit the curb and damaged the turntable and the hydraulic cylinders on the underbody, as well as trying to fix a 1969 D7 dozer so that we can prepare it for sale. Otherwise, just an announcement, Christmas tree collection, we've been getting calls on that. That's scheduled for January 20th, the last full week of January. With that, we work with Wisconsin DNR and help them kind of congregate the trees in an area for them to provide fish cribbing and things like that on some of our local waterways. And with that, that is my report.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul on the street report? All right, we'll move to engineering. Go ahead, Nick.
So start with our standalone signal grants that we got for signal improvements at the Expressway and West Grand, as well as at the Expressway and Chase and High Street. So our project at West Grand, that project is pretty much complete. We were waiting on 2 blank out signs that we switched out to LEDs. Those have been installed, and so we're at the point now where we're ready to close out the project and do final reimbursement. So the other project, the expressway at Chase and High, so the holdup with that was a permit issue that we had between our contractor and the railroad to work in railroad right-of-way. And so that permit has finally been secured. And so the latest I heard is, it sounds like next week, middle of next week, we'll have our contractor in. And he's got as little as even a day's worth of work, get his work completed, do all the testing with the preemption, with the railroad and the signals, and then possibly have everything opened up, traffic control pulled, and have the High Street intersection finally opened up. So from what I understand, that could, if everything goes well, we could have that open up middle of the week next week. So that's the signal improvement projects. In terms of design, we are, as you can see the percentages there, we are pretty much wrapping up design on all our projects. We are at least 75% on everything, and basically to the point of just tweaking our plans and getting our permits submitted and reviewed, so we're ready to hit the ground running for construction this year. So that's kind of where we're at with design on all of our projects. In addition to that, survey work, we've got a good amount of survey work this year. So we've got 13th Avenue from West Grand to Fremont, Apricot Street from 15th to 17th, 15th Avenue North from West Grand to High Street, and 16th Avenue North from West Grand to High Street. So those are our projects that we'll try to get started here when the weather turns, and get as much of that done before construction gets too far underway. And then we'll come back in the fall to wrap everything up with our survey work for next year's projects. Just a quick note on 1 Mile Creek. So we did, engineering department had a little bit of involvement, just trying to get things ready to go for construction from our end. So we did send letters out in December to the property owners on 1 Mile Creek. And we did, got to survey our construction stakes in the ground. And also just coordinating, we did a little bit of work with the DNR, just coordinating and letting them know that work would be getting started, and we'd be following up with permit provisions and that sort of thing. So that was kind of our little bit of involvement with that. Joe did want me to mention something on the 32nd Street rail crossing near Kingston Road. So just a quick background. So we did receive a notice from the Office of the Commissioner of Railroads, the OCR, that crossing at 32nd Street near Kingston, that was not up to their standards. The pavement width was too wide. And so our response to that was to put together a concept plan on what the fix would be. And so we did that. You know, we proposed, I believe it was pavement markings and a little bit of removal of pavement near the tracks. We submitted that to the OCR over the summer last year. And then I think we also filed for a petition for alteration, just a formality with them as well. But the latest update on everything, on where we're at right now, is that the OCR issued a scheduling order to us that's part of this whole alteration plan. And what it requires is kind of testimony on the city's part regarding how we're going to address the problem, what warning devices we're going to use, how we're going to accomplish all the work, and what we think the cost would be and who's going to pay for it and that sort of thing. So I believe Joe's handling all that and has, taking care of the testimony and the exhibits and all that. That's set to take place on January 17th. On February 3rd, the Village of Buren and the county and the railroad have a chance to put together a rebuttal testimony. And then the following week, the city has some more testimony, and then a public hearing on, I believe, February 18th. So after that whole process is through, then a decision will be made, and we'll know if our plan was acceptable and kind of what the next course of action is. But that's where things are at this point with that project. And I think that's all I got for engineering.
Thank you, Nick. I'm relieved to hear the High Street crossing is going to open soon, the 14th, you said, hopefully. I've received a number of calls there, so hopefully we can take what's happened there as a lesson learned and try to get ahead of it on future work there. Anyone else, committee comments for engineering? Go ahead, Madeline.
I just have a question for you, Ryan. The Kingston Road 32nd Street crossing, that's different from the other Kingston Road crossing that we've been discussing?
That is,
Okay, I
yep.
just wanted to clarify.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we will move on. Item 3 is review and consider removing sidewalk on 2nd Street North between Cherry Street and Poplar Street as part of the road project in 2025. Go ahead, Nick.
So the Second Street project, which is slated for 2026, the question came up at the last Public Works meeting on what to do with the sidewalk there. We have over 50% of the sidewalk on just that block. I think we did provide a map in the referral or in the packet. But we wanted to take a closer look on if it was feasible to keep it or get rid of it or what have you. Kind of the desire at that point was to reach out to property owners along 2nd Street. So that's what we did, and we have a little table we put together. We're able to make contact with a couple of residents. There was one rental that would like to see the sidewalk stay, and a couple additional properties that would like to see the sidewalk go. And that's kind of as far as we got with that. So we're able to reach out and at least make some contact. But that being said, in addition to that, the street is not a collector or an arterial, and it's not on a school route. It is not connected to any of our other sidewalk that we have going through town. And so I guess it doesn't go to like a park or, like I said, a school route. So that all that being taken into consideration, the fact that it's not really connected to anything and otherwise wouldn't be required to be put back, except for the fact that it's 50% of it's there right now. The engineering department is recommending that it just get removed as part of the project. But just wanted to leave it open to discussion and any questions or direction that the committee would like to give on it.
Thank you, Nick. Questions, comments?
Nick, the NAs on the table, are those NAs because we couldn't contact them or they never returned our calls, or are they NAs because they don't have a preference?
I believe those were that we couldn't get a hold of them.
Okay.
Yeah, that if contact was made, I believe we would have had that comment in there for that. So I don't believe we were able to make any contact with those.
Excellent. Then I agree with the engineering assessment that we should remove that portion of the sidewalk.
Is it a motion?
Can be. I make a motion to approve that we remove that section of the sidewalk.
I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Pollak.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only question I would have, where there are just people that would still like that sidewalk there, if they are teaching their children to stay out of this road or what have you, I realize there's a cost involved with it, but I think in a case like that, maybe you should maybe talk to the people or think it over a little bit and maybe put those sidewalks back in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll go to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So ayes have it, motion carries. All right, moving on to item 4, consider setting degradation fee rates for the 2025 calendar year. Nick?
So around this time of the year, every year, we'd like to update our degradation fees. And so we've been doing this since 2021, from what I understand. I believe it was 2021. And The point of it being that anytime we have a private contractor or utility digging in the street, whether they're tearing up asphalt or sidewalk or curb and gutter, what have you, the goal is to recoup some of those costs, some of those eventual maintenance and maybe even replacement costs that you would have for that patch, that even though the patch gets put back new, there's still maintenance efforts with that, and there's still a loss there. And so that's the point of the degradation fees. And so every year we try to update those costs based on the prior year and the costs that we had from our working with our contractors the prior year. So based on that, you can see that they generally, we have a table from 21 to 24, and that obviously fluctuates for each item every year, but generally moves up based on, labor costs going up and material costs going up as well. So it's not a dollar for dollar comparison. Whatever it costs for a contractor to do the work the prior year, that's figured into the calculations for our degradation fees. And so if you see a spike in costs or reduction in costs, that would be reflected in our degradation fees the following year. So you can kind of see the trend there for all the items. The one item I will bring up is the concrete pavement, and that's that you can kind of see from 21 to 24 how it's kind of steadily rising from around $15 an hour to $26 per square foot. And with that, we are proposing $9.58 per square foot for concrete pavement. And the reason for that is that those first 3 years, we had our concrete contractor that did concrete pavement work for us was SD Ellenbecker, and was capable of doing the work, but just not as efficiently as Summers, who was our contractor last year in 2024, who's kind of built to do more of that work. And so we had a much more favorable price for concrete pavement replacement, and so that got reflected in the calculations for the degradation fees for 2025. So that's why you see a drop there. That being said, we do not do a lot of degradation fees for concrete pavement work because contractors really don't want to get into concrete pavement. They don't want to disturb it. They don't want to have to replace it, and to remove it, it's very expensive. So they generally stay away from that as much as they can. So either way, it's nothing that will make or break anything, but just wanted to give that asterisk there on that. But the rates that we have that we're proposing based on our calculations that we do every year are shown in yellow, and that's what we are proposing for this coming year's degradation fees. But we're hoping to get approval for those rates.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions for Nick on the degradation fees?
Right. Yes. And I did double check the rates, and that $9.58 per square foot is much closer to what the industry average is, at least in our state, in Wisconsin. So that's actually much closer than what the $26 was, or even the low 20s. So the rate that we have proposed is actually much closer to what an industry standard would be. So.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the proposed degradation fees for 2025 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to vote. All in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Item 5, review and consider request from Alderperson Palmquist to discuss options for an all-terrain vehicle and utility terrain vehicle ordinance. So I think I'll kick this off and hopefully it spurs some conversation. So today I would like to reaffirm my continued support of an ATV, UTV ordinance here in the city of Wisconsin Rapids. While I understand that a recent referendum vote did not pass, the undeniable economic benefits that this ordinance could bring to our community remains a key factor in my position. With a total of 8,819 voters casting ballots, the referendum resulted in 55% voting no and 45% voting yes. And while the majority voted against the ordinance, the narrow margin suggests that there is a significant portion of our community that sees the potential value in this proposal. More importantly, the district I represent, District 1, voted in favor for this ordinance with 506 votes in favor and 455 against. Those are the voices that I represent, and I have a responsibility to act in their best interest. As many of you know, Wisconsin Rapids is strategically positioned near one of the largest and most extensive ATV-UTV trail networks in the state. And by embracing an ordinance that allows these vehicles to legally operate on city streets, we open the door to tremendous economic opportunity. Local businesses, including restaurants, hotels, gas stations, and retailers, will benefit from the influx of visitors coming to enjoy our trails. Tourism, in turn, creates jobs and strengthens our economy, and as an alderman, I believe it is crucial that we take advantage of these opportunities. So that being said, I also recognize the importance of crafting an ordinance that ensures public safety. One of the key points I would continue to advocate for is that all operators of UTVs and ATVs on city streets must have a valid driver's license. It's critical that we do not create a loophole that allows individuals who have not gone through any driver training or have lost their driving privileges to use this ordinance as a way to operate on public roads. Our streets must remain safe for all residents, and I am committed to ensuring that any ordinance we implement does not put our community at risk. I also want to emphasize that while the referendum did not pass, I remain open to working with the community, city staff, and fellow council members to ensure that the ordinance language is clear and responsible and appropriate. We must create a balanced approach that promotes economic growth while maintaining the safety of our streets and the well-being of our residents. So, in conclusion, the benefits of this ordinance for our city are too significant to ignore. I will continue to support an ordinance that reflects the wishes of the district I represent and the broader interests of Wisconsin Rapids. The economic impact, the potential for growth, and the opportunity to showcase our city as a destination cannot be overlooked. So, moving forward, any other further comments on this?
I think you pretty much said it all.
Well done.
You hit on every talking point I would have had.
I know we have some folks in the audience that may want to speak, or am I incorrect on that? Roland, Wood County Supervisor, what's the title? Commissioner, would you like to speak? Come on up. Yeah, state your name, address, make sure the green light is on the mic.
Well, good evening. My name is Roland Hawk. I'm a Wood County Highway Commissioner, and my opportunity to speak to you tonight kind of revolves around the intersection or the section of road of we consider Griffith Avenue or County Trunk Z. Wood County was initially introducing certain routes for ATV traffic, and our initial program of opening up roads to ATVs was to do it slowly. Take approach to routes that were low volume, more rural, more rustic, where most people felt that's where ATVs should be. And there was a misconception of what we thought was going to happen when we opened up county roads. That we were going to have destruction, vandalism, folks tearing up our shoulders and pavements, and we've not experienced that at all. Most of our riders that we've been able to identify are 40, 50, 60s, and they're traveling in very expensive machines, well-behaved, and obeying the laws. So as we started to see more activity in Wood County, we opened up more county highways. I will say I was not in favor of opening as many as we have to begin with, because as a transportation engineer, my feeling was my foremost goal should be transporting goods and services and the traffic that pays the taxes beyond that road. But the more we experienced ATVs and UTVs being on our roads, we did not see problems. So again, we opened up and expanded the use of more highways. So today, our policy is all county highways are open unless otherwise posted. We have 3 roads currently in Wood County highways that are not open. And one of them is within a township that does not have an ordinance and doesn't want to have it, but they agreed to open one portion of county highway to get traffic around them near Marshfield. The other one is in town of Cranmore, and that's because they do not have highways or any other connection other than their town roads, and all their town roads are pretty much gravel, and they do not want to have to, or don't have the funds to go out and maintain them, so they've elected to stay closed. The other is County Trunk Highway A. If you've driven A, you would understand. It's heavily trafficked, high speeds, lots of trucks, lots of farm equipment, some curves that are not forgiving, so it has alternate routes around it. So until we've made improvements to Highway A, I've asked our committee not to open that, and they've agreed to that. So otherwise, all of the county highways are open. We left the section of Griffith closed until the referendum, and when it didn't pass, we were getting a lot, and I mean a lot, of requests to find another route to give folks that were wanting to go from the eastern portion of the county out and explore the western portion of the county. And that meant crossing Highway 13 somewhere. And so we have a couple of town roads across 13 that have to go to the median of a 4-lane road and then on to the other side. The best location is at the intersection of 13 and Griffith. You have a controlled intersection, it's slow speed, and we provide access on both sides of that. So once the committee asked the city if they had a resolution, or I should say an ordinance, and found out there wasn't, our committee, with correspondence with your council and our council, said that it was within the county's right to open that section of road, and so we did.
That would be incorrect. I was not involved at all until after you passed the ordinance, and my conversations with Peter were after that. But, and I think there's still some ambiguity on that, but that's probably not even relevant now if the direction we're going is the direction we're going. So, but I just wanted to state that for the record.
So that's why I came tonight, was to explain that, was, you know, we did not want to go against the city's direction, but with the ability to open that up and provide another safe crossing of Highway 13, the committee instructed me to do that, so we did. But to go back to some comments you made, the county has a policy, or I should say an ordinance, and we don't discriminate for folks that don't have a driver's license. They must have certification to be on an ATV or UTV. And if they have that, the DNR allows them to be on that and enter wherever they're permitted. So that's what we've agreed to. So if somebody doesn't have a driver's license and they want to use a UTV, as long as they have the certification to ride it, they're okay on Wood County highways. So if you have questions on how we've moved forward and how we've gotten to this point and what we're seeing as far as riders and participation and whatever, I'm glad to answer questions.
Any questions?
Roland, thank you. To consider the roads that are currently open with the county, have you gone back and assessed and closed any county highways, or once they're open, are they open?
I have the authority to close them. We have not. We have looked at a couple of highways as we make improvements to see if we need to do things, you know, make it safer or adjust for that. We've made some shoulders a little wider, added additional signing in some places, but other than that, riders are being behaved. We did make an adjustment to our ordinance. We did restrict traffic, or I should say, we did restrict ATV traffic to 35 miles per hour or less. That was a mistake. Shortly after we opened our highways, we started seeing small groups riding, going, you know, on certain rides or just out being together. And if you string out 8, 9, 10 UTVs that are all driving 35 miles per hour, and you as a motorist coming up on them at 55, you may not be able to overtake them and pass them. So you may be stuck behind them for quite a ways. Most of these vehicles can go well over 55. So we eliminated that part of our ordinance and said that they can drive the speed limit. And that has cleared up those issues, and we don't have them anymore.
Okay. And even without having a requirement in the county ordinance to have a valid driver's license, are you aware of lots of people or violations with drivers, anything that comes up because of that lack of restriction?
I don't know that. I couldn't
Okay.
tell you. I do have a conversation with the sheriff's office on occasion, you know, what they're hearing, what they're doing, and it doesn't come up. It doesn't come up.
Thank you.
I'm sure there are folks out there that are riding without a driver's license or certification, but you see that behind the wheel every day, you know, every street out here you could stop, and I'll bet you there's going to be somebody out there without a valid driver's license driving a motor vehicle.
And the county has a restriction or has an additional requirement to have insurance as well, correct? Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Sue.
And I did talk to Peter about this, and I guess I want to make sure we're on the same page. Is it the county's position that the city can have an ordinance regarding that portion of County Highway Z that is within the boundaries of the city regarding ATVs, either allowing them or disallowing them?
Correct.
Okay, and the city could have an ordinance that's different than what your ordinance is in terms of maybe having driver's license or things like that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, because I think way at the beginning there was at least, I mean, the first thing I heard was that the county was saying, well, we can just go, we're just going to go do this, and there's nothing the city can do about it. But, I mean, I appreciate that, you know, obviously after the referendum failed and working together, and obviously this is something that needs to be taken up. But I just wanted to be clear on, like, who, you know, that's an appropriate exercise for us to undertake, is to address exactly, and it may be different than what your ordinance is, which kind of is,
Correct.
might get complicated if you're coming up to a spot and then it's different. The rules are different and you go through the intersection and then the rules might be back to where they were before.
If I may address that too? Mm-hmm. So as we were developing our ordinance, we worked with the DNR, and just prior to us starting to open some roads, Portage County was taking it and running with it, and they were opening up everything. And Clark County had opened up everything. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to make sure that folks who are traveling through the county, who, you know, hop on their machine over and say Portage County and want to go over to the Clark County or Jackson County Forest, that they don't become an outlaw when they pass through Wood County. So we wanted to keep the rules of Wood County as similar to our neighbors as possible, so that we weren't creating somebody, you know, an illegal situation once they crossed into Wood County. So we stayed as tight to the state, the DNR ordinance as we possibly could, with the exception of insurance. And you'll never know that unless unless a stop is made and you have
Right,
insurance.
right. But Marshfield requires licensed drivers on ATVs. The other,
They might, I don't know for sure, but they probably do.
they do. So so you don't really have a city in the county as large as Rapids or even close to that where you're allowing, where there are 12-year-olds on ATVs, you know, going in more populous areas or on more busy streets.
We're not seeing that. We're not
Okay.
having problems.
Well, but it's not legal in Marshfield and it's not legal in Rapids. So in Wood County, so you really don't have the experience of 12-year-olds on ATVs in more urban settings. Is that a fair statement? I mean, I realize there might be places outside of the county, but, okay, thank you.
And just one last comment too is the section of Griffith is, you're right. Without the city having the ordinance, the jurisdiction of that highway falling under the county, we could open it up with our ordinance. Now, if you create a more strict ordinance within the city's municipality, then yes, you could essentially have a more strict ordinance applied to that section of road.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor Zecher?
Still just, I guess first, is Point open? Stevens Point?
Stevens Point? I don't know. I couldn't say for sure.
Okay.
I do know Stevens Point opened up, or I should say, the city of Portage County opened up every county highway
Okay.
with no, like, major restrictions.
Okay. And if, again, I'm just asking for clarification, because it was just brought up. So if we had a more strict, because what I understood in the first meeting that we were at, or last month, at first we thought if we didn't have an ordinance, that means that no ATV, UTVs were allowed. And it sounds like that kind of got overruled by the county. But if we had a more strict ordinance, so we'd have to pass an ordinance strictly that said no ATVs are allowed on our roads, and then we would be overriding the
Within your
county
municipal
ordinance.
boundary, yes.
Within that boundary.
You know,
Going back to a couple of things I had, Maddie kind of already clarified, but I'd like to ask again. So what you're saying is in the county, 12 to 15-year-olds can ride the ATVs with a parent,
Yes,
and then 16 and older, they don't need a license either. They just need a certificate from the DNR.
correct.
For drinking and driving, are they allowed open containers?
Don't believe so. I'd have to look to make sure, but I don't believe so.
But can they be, is it .08 or is it, if they-
So you're subject to the same laws of any motor vehicle. If you're arrested for a DUI on a ATV, UTV, you're cited. But unfortunately, at this point, that doesn't go on your permanent driving record.
okay.
So I do know there are some associations, including the Wisconsin County Highways Association, who I'm a member of, who are asking legislators to take this up and make that a permanent record on their driving record, so that people just aren't jumping onto a UTV in lieu of their vehicle and going to a tavern and driving back and forth. So we're hoping that you can still be arrested, you can still be cited, it's just that it doesn't go on your permanent driving record.
And then you did clarify that the county said it as you have to have insurance, and that's the typical insurance from a car, the same kind of
liability
insurance.
insurance. Yep.
Liability insurance. And then the last thing, I know I get my butt kicked a lot for this, but just turn signals. Nobody saw the need, even though they're driving in the dark, to have turn signals as a requirement for these vehicles.
We did not. And again, that we wanted to stay as close to the DNR's ordinance that they had developed. What we are seeing is a higher percentage of UTVs that are coming equipped with signals and everything on them. We're seeing a lot less ATVs on the highway. There's still some. Where I live in Port Edwards, I still see them, but that number's getting smaller and smaller. Most of the vehicles that we're seeing are mostly UTVs that are coming equipped with the lights and signals and everything else.
So anything we have in the city as a ordinance, the folks that are coming from Grand Rapids or Nakusa, Port Edwards, and they're coming into the city, if it's different, they need to know what those differences are in order to enter in the streets. And then, of course, we have to try to enforce those, which is
Correct.
kind of a nightmare in itself, I'm sure. But that's kind of what that would look like. So anything that switches out, like we require blinkers or turn signals, but nobody else does, then it's a problem. It's not. It's not.
It could be, yeah. Again, where we started off, we took it slow, and like I said, we opened a few just to test the water, and we did not have problems. We were not seeing people out, vandalizing stuff or tearing up the road or excessive drinking and driving or open containers. It wasn't happening. And Sheriff's Department, the first year we met probably every couple of months, talked about, what we're seeing, what changes we need to make. And like I said, the only change that we had to make was allowing ATVs and UTVs to drive the posted speed limit and not 35. Other than that, you could talk to the Sheriff's Department and they'll tell you that we're not seeing what was everybody's fear, you know, that ATVs and UTVs are going to disrupt our community. They aren't.
Actually, kind of going off what Attorney Schill was saying about, we don't, like, what's the, like, what's your opinion on the there's a difference between rural and urban, and I know that we're not a massive metropolis, but at the same time, the driving habits are, you know, and are different here than they will be in a rural area. Do you see, what's your opinion on what the differences would be and what the problems that
Yep.
could
Well,
be?
I live in Port Edwards, which is an urban area, and I have them running past my house all the time. They drive the speed limit. They you know, they follow the code of the road. So I don't see any issues. And you can have 12-year-olds out there on a bike. You can have them, you know, in traffic on you know, a regular bike, which, you know, that's a parent's discretion on what they want to, you know, there's a lot of 12-year-olds out there that are doing things that, you know, some adults can't do. So, you know, I guess you got to look at the individual specifically and say, you know, should they or shouldn't they be? And that's somewhat of a parent's decision. And if they're not with a parent or guardian, then yes, they should not be out there on a vehicle, which should be evident if, you know, an officer passes them. But we have not had any issues in Port Edwards. The small communities like Hewitt, and well, Hewitt just opened up, but Pittsville, Millador, they're not seeing any issues.
Okay.
We're not seeing a bunch of 12-year-olds running around on ATVs, you know, by themselves, going out and getting in trouble.
Appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Brian?
Maddie?
I have just a comment on a few things. So most of the machines that we're seeing on the roadway today are UTVs. And those who are responsible parents work with their kids on driving an ATV and then making sure that they're used to that and they're safe before they go out with them on an ATV. All of our roads in the city that we could open are 35 miles an hour or less. So whether we are a bigger city than any of the other areas that are open, the roads that we're proposing get open, if it comes to all of them, are significantly less speed than the county roads that are open. And I don't have any traffic studies to prove it, but I feel like the county roads with the speed and the number of vehicles is likely comparable to any of the roads that are within the city. Marshfield also has a number of restrictions in their ordinance that are significantly different from other areas, including helmets for all drivers. The repercussions of that is that people like myself don't go to Marshfield because I don't want to abide by those rules. So by having more restrictions above and beyond what the state has proven is safe only restricts the point of opening, which is to try to bring in people and have them experience the city. So I'm more inclined to lean with the things that we know we should put in there: insurance, no open containers. Anyone over the age of 16 should have a valid driver's license, having insurance and presenting it to officers, and then keeping it as close as we can to the areas that are around us so that we don't trap people on 600 feet of road for not having blinkers. And for clarification, anyone born after December 1st, 1988 needs to have a safety certificate, whether they have a valid driver's license or not, anywhere on an ATV or UTV. Thank you.
Any further questions? Sue?
So did you say Marshfield requires helmets? It says anyone, operators and riders under 18 must wear helmets for Marshfield.
I wonder if they changed it recently, and I did not check that. But they did at one time require helmets for all riders.
Okay. And it
But
could
that's-
be, this is
that's
what's on
state.
their website right now.
Yep, and state requires anyone under the age of 18 to have a helmet, which
Under 18.
anyone under the age of 18,
Yeah.
correct?
And you don't have any time limitations on any of your, like, not after 10 or before 6 a.m.? Does Grand Rapids, does anybody know,
Grand Rapids does.
has time limitation? And Marshfield does also, I think, right? Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
So I understand some of the arguments against valid driver's licenses and having a more strict ordinance within the city. But again, I think this is a bit of a different environment than rural areas. And, you know, some key reasons why I feel we should have valid driver's licenses for any operators is, you know, it ensures the operator has passed the minimum level of knowledge and skill, including rules of the road and traffic laws. Many individuals without driver's licenses might lack proper driving experience and understanding of how to safely operate a vehicle in a public road, especially within a city. You know, road safety compliance licensed drivers are familiar with road regulations, including speed limit, stop signs, and other rules. And consistency across vehicles, you know, requiring a driver's license for an ATV, UTV operation would align with these vehicles. I mean, they're in the roadway. We're not off to the side on a bicycle, right? And, you know, prevention of reckless or inexperienced driving, you know, without a driver's license requirement, unqualified operators, like I stated previously, including minors or individuals with poor driving records, might use ATVs and UTVs on city streets and potentially lead to reckless behavior. So I'm going to be sticking to my guns on driver's licenses. I will not agree to an ordinance that does not include it.
Right?
I'll recognize, I think it's Kevin, right? Come on up, state your name and address. Make sure the green light's on.
My name's Kevin Fangman. I live at 710 3rd Street South. I spoke in this room when we were talking about the ballot initiative. I'm one of the 55% that didn't want this to happen. I'll explain my concerns and the ones that you've addressed, and you can take that as you may. The number one thing for me was unlicensed drivers. I agree with the things that Mr. Austin is saying. UTV, ATV training does not teach you rules of the road, simple things like what do you do if you come to a four-way stop at the same time as someone to your right. They're not going to know the answer to that question. I don't believe that, you know, 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds have the wherewithal to understand the concerns or the safety concerns or the safety operation of a vehicle on a city street. That's a lot different than operating it out on a highway. One of my concerns was addressed by Mr. Rowland, which was out on the highways, getting stuck behind a line of ATV, UTVs going 20 or 30 miles an hour under the speed limit would be a problem. So that would be an asset in my mind to be in favor of this after that. The mayor mentioned a little bit about safety equipment. You talked about lighting. We didn't talk about collision. Vehicles that are driven on the roadways, licensed for the roadways, have to pass collision standards. These vehicles do not. I personally drive a 3-ton conversion van. If that conversion van were to collide with an ATV at an intersection at 25 miles an hour, the people in the ATV would be guaranteed to die. They would not survive. It's not possible. The physics are not there. If they do not have crumple zones, they do have rollover capabilities with the roll bars. They have, most of the time they have open space between those roll bars and the doorways, which will allow flailing arms, et cetera, to go outside of the vehicle as it rolls over and gets crushed, which is exactly what would happen at a low-speed collision with a vehicle that has a higher center of gravity than an automobile. So what would get me to change my mind about this? Because most of the people in this room know me quite well, and I'm very big on advancing city commerce. One of the things, the chief things that would get me to change my mind on this would be that licensed drivers were the only ones who were allowed to operate these vehicles in our city. At least in that scenario, I would have a comfort level that the person that is approaching the intersection that I'm approaching knows the rules of the road, knows what to look for, knows when they're supposed to yield, versus someone that doesn't. Some of the other concerns I would have is, like, say, these vehicles are not specifically designed on roads. So besides things like turn signals and safety equipment, there's nothing that will prevent them from putting low restriction exhaust on these vehicles, creating a great deal of noise inside the city. I think that should be addressed if you're going to have an ordinance to pass. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you're not going to be able to take an ATV and provide all the safety equipment that you would have in an automobile. And therefore, those people that would be driving those vehicles in our city do so at their own peril if they're involved in a collision with an automobile that has all that safety equipment and weighs a great deal more than they do. However, if the ordinance was written where the only people that were allowed to drive them were licensed drivers, and I therefore felt like they knew what they needed to do on the road and knew the risks, like people that drive motorcycles as an example, they know the risks, and that's why we allow them. They're licensed vehicles, they're certified to be safe on the roads, then I would be in favor of it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dean.
Thank you, Kevin. I just want to go on record. I would never vote for something that does not require a driver's license. And I'm also inclined to agree with safety, blinkers, safety precautions, blinkers, lights, etc. And I understand what Alderperson Palmquist said about not punishing people that are going through our town from another neighborhood, but I don't represent the people in the other towns, and I represent the city of Wisconsin Rapids. So for me, I would advocate for turn signals, et cetera, and driver's license. But the other part of this is, while Mr. Austin mentioned the referendum, it was still 55% of the citizens voted against this. I understand 45% voted for it, but in politics these days, 55-45 is a landslide. So, but the bottom line on this is, if there were an ordinance to pass, to me, it needs to be considerably different than the one that didn't. Thus, driver's licenses, whether it's turn signals, whether it's things like that, because otherwise we're just avoiding the will of the people. The ordinance that we put up before them before did not pass. If we're trying to put another ordinance in against their will, I can't fly with that. So hopefully, if we do draft something, it comes up different, that that the people that voted against it might be able to sway their vote, such as Mr. Fangman said. So to me, it can't be the same. So thanks.
Maddie?
And I agree with Alderperson Fenneman, where I do not want an ordinance that is exactly the same as that was on the referendum, because the citizens of Wisconsin Rapids do not want that ordinance. That question, though, was not, do the citizens of Wisconsin Rapids want this at all? The question was, do the citizens of Wisconsin Rapids want an ordinance that allows 12 to 16-year-olds to drive an ATV on a street, or whatever it was, however it was written? That is a no. And I do not want that. I would like us to come up with something that addresses the concerns of the people, that clarifies and allows us to educate the people. I know that there were some that voted no because they didn't realize that insurance was a requirement in the ordinance that was presented on the ballot, and thus they voted no. Passing an ordinance without having to go through the process of relying on citizens and the funding from businesses to be able to get the word out is not going to help us. But as I stated previously, most of the vehicles on the road now are UTVs. While there is no problems at the county or state level with the way the state statute is written, I completely understand the potential fear and hesitation with allowing unlicensed drivers. I do support putting in that drivers do have to have a valid driver's license. And I would encourage that to be added to what was drafted and proposed for discussion this evening. Also note that the state has decibel restrictions of, I believe it's 75 decibels on the state statute, which is why it wasn't listed in the one presented. Thank you.
Anyone else? Dean?
One of the things I never really brought up during the last case, and just thought of it at this point when you were just talking, have we ever considered just UTVs and not ATVs? Have we ever discussed it in that regard? And that would make more sense to me, that's all.
Okay, so we do have a draft ordinance in the packet. Sue, have you taken a look at that ordinance?
I have. I guess it depends what you want to do, because this, are we talking about attachment, are we talking about throughout the city?
Yeah,
Right.
attachment 3 throughout the city.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was going to come on tonight, and was waiting for legislative, so I didn't go through and everything, but it looks, I mean, it's relying more on the state ordinance and not, the state statute versus, when I originally did my ordinance, it was pretty comprehensive and took a lot of the state ordinance and made it into local ordinances. So then when our officers write tickets, it would actually be based upon a local ordinance versus adopting a state ordinance. But I think it's, I probably might make a few changes to it. Obviously, if you're going to address the driver's licensing issue, but I think that might be the only issue. It contains a lot of the other things from the original ordinance. But I think, I could come up with something, or if I would suggest any changes by the time of council. I guess that's, I want to, maybe I should address this, I was going to wait till council, but I guess this ordinance originated at legislative back in July of 2023. It was taken up by the legislative committee. It was then taken to council on the 15th. That was a report from the legislative committee. September 5th, the legislative committee took this up. September 19th, specifically the council, or I should say at the September 5th meeting, the August 15th meeting, there was basically a referral back to legislative by the full council. September 19th was the council meeting accepting the report from the legislative committee. October 17th, the council considered the ordinance. July 15th of 2024, there was an issue regarding the ATV, UTV legislative ordinance on legislative. So I guess to now that it's moved to Public Works, I guess I'm not quite sure how that happened after being voted on in legislative for a number of months and council referring it to legislative by vote. So I understand it needs to be taken up. I totally agree with that, and it needs to be timely taken up, but I guess I just question why we're at Public Works at this point after it had gone through legislative. But in any event, I can look at this ordinance, and if I have any suggested changes, I will get them to you by council, and based on any particular changes that you make to this, I can incorporate those into the ordinance.
I can answer the switch from legislative to Public Works. This ordinance solely impacts streets and the use of streets and street signs. And our Municipal Chapter Code 2 states that Public Works Committee is responsible for the policy relating to streets, rights of way, street programs, dedications of use of streets, special assessment streets names, anything streets goes to Public Works Committee. The Legislative Committee, on the other hand, is responsible for anything that does not directly relate to the areas of responsibility of the other three standing committees. In addition to the other portion of our ordinance, which says that anything must be referred to the appropriate committee before going to council, I wanted to make sure that we had the appropriate committee reviewing something and then sending it up to council so that we didn't have any other hurdles to jump if it went to the inappropriate committee and then up to council.
Okay, I guess at the time that the original referral was, the three chairs of the committee are on the legislative committee, and it was agreed to go to legislative. The overnight parking ordinance went to legislative. I think that may have even been a referral. Well, it was a referral from the council, but I understand your argument, I guess. I guess that, I think it probably should have had a discussion about it, but.
I think a good process in place from council would help make sure that things are streamlined moving forward so that we knew as council members submitting these exactly where they go and how they get there. I think would be a huge benefit, especially for me, who just wants to read the rules and submit things appropriately.
Right, and would that involve staff being involved in knowing when things are placed on the agenda and allowed to comment and to prepare for the meetings? Or do we find out when the agenda comes out? So I guess, yeah, I think I totally agree. A policy on that everybody understands and there's communication. I'm 100% for that.
Great.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Mayor Zacher.
Could I ask somebody from the committee to acknowledge the young lady in the back here, please?
Oh, no,
If you're so willing.
I'm not on the committee.
Make sure the green light on the mic base is on, and state your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Michael Ann McClintock. I'm at 1940 Oak Street. I just want to make sure that you, they were saying that the police department didn't have any problems with things, but as soon as we had left in the spring, then that summer, right after that, there was teenagers ripping up the lawns and that was according to the scanner page. They were ripping up the lawns on ATVs in town. Then at the last one, at the referendum, before it went to the referendum, I believe, there's been 2 high-speed chases on four-wheelers. So I just don't understand why they're saying there's nothing going on, but that the people are not abusing those ATVs. I would prefer that the UTVs be, if you're going to have it, the UTVs would be a much safer thing. I wouldn't feel bad about driving behind one, and they are going to have a driver's license, and you don't have to worry about 12-year-olds that are impulsive being on the city streets, because the thing is, kids don't listen. You can't guarantee that they're going to listen to their parent that is even next to them, because there's a lot of children that are very impulsive. I just don't know what you guys are planning on doing here, but, they switched what the route was at first to just going around Wisconsin Rapids, which was fine, going down Baker or whatever around that areas. But when they switched to going all the streets, I just can't agree with that. And most of the people, and a lot of older people that I've talked to, they didn't know that there was going to be ATVs going down the streets. They didn't realize it because obviously not everybody is paying attention to city government, which they should. But I don't know, I'm just a little concerned. I'm more concerned about the driver's license thing and making sure that everybody's safe. But I would preferably like to exclude the ATVs completely. That's the one I would my preference, and which I've talked to a lot of other people. I know it's a lot easier on gas for people and stuff like that, but I'm sorry, I'm just not a very good speaker, but yes, that's my concerns at this time. Thank you.
Come on up.
Hi, Brian Marsh, 221 2 Mile Avenue. You guys heard me talk a lot about a lot of different things here, so you pretty much know my stance on a lot of it. We've been pretty flexible and open to just about anything to try to get it going. In the first place, I always advocate going back to trying to stick as closely as possible to the state code as well as Wood County's ordinance, because we know that it works. I get a lot of the concerns, I do. I think if you guys didn't have those initial concerns and you didn't have those points where you're like, we should look at that, I'd probably think you were a little crazy. It's totally fair, totally warranted. But this has been happening for decades. There's so much data, so much information. There's not a single bit of proof that I've seen from anybody on any of these things that everybody's so fearful of being an actual issue. You can reference any point you want of what we're considering our city size, certain roads we're crossing, whatever. There is something way worse in other locations that this works just fine in. We've crossed Highway 10, Highway 54 heading towards Plover. Those are a nightmare. The issues don't happen there. I get the being hesitant on the kids. I do. I'm a father of two. I can't imagine anything happen to my kids, but I believe kids need opportunities. I know way more adults that are more ignorant and irresponsible and should not be doing things than kids. And most of the time, the kids that I have been doing this with, that I know that are right in our groups that we do it with, are extremely responsible. And the reason they are so extremely responsible is because they're allowed to do this. I would encourage you guys to talk to the DNR about this. Wisconsin has a long-standing history of allowing kids to do things for the reasons of when you start them young, you get good habits built in early, and you get more responsible adults that are doing these activities. That's why kids can hunt at any age at this point. They can operate a snowmobile, which those things can absolutely fly and scream. They can operate a snowmobile at the age of 12. They can operate a boat at the age of 12. And the DNR supports this because it helps bring more responsible, better behaviors in these kids later in life, and they don't see problems with it. So I get it. If that's the case, so be it. But my kids, I don't want to live in a bubble. Everybody's so afraid of something happening to kids nowadays that they don't even let them live their life anymore, experience things, take chances, have opportunities to do anything. I won't let my kid go on a bike because there's so many crazy drivers out there. If my kid's responsible and I think he's going to be, and I know he's responsible and he's going to listen, he's going to be safe, I would absolutely let him ride an ATV. If he's not going to operate one. But I would like to be able to, as the parent of that child, I would like to be able to make that decision based on what's going on. And if that turns into where there's a whole bunch of accidents with kids all over the place, he's not going to, because that's something that happens. But as of now, everything that I hear is I'm afraid of, I fear, I think that there's nothing tangible with any of it. And that's my concern. There's so much information, so much data, I get it. I get the concerns, but there's nothing tangible that's being brought to the table to oppose it. And I'm a guy who looks at facts, looks at statistics, looks at data, and says, okay, what's going on, what's happening, let's make a decision based on that. And if there's nothing, then we need to make the best decision we possibly can. I get we're not like every other decision or every other place that has done this. But I just encourage to go out, ask the questions, talk to people who do this with their kids, talk to families who do this, talk to the DNR. When I talked to Marshfield about why they required driver's license, they just felt it was a good idea. There was nothing behind it other than that. So that's just my spiel on it. I just think we should ask these people, talk to these individuals. If that's the case, so be it. I'm just ready to get something passed, but I think kids should be allowed opportunities. I think they need it. I think there's so few things they can do in this world nowadays that I used to do when I was a kid, like biking by myself. I grew up operating ATVs, and it was a huge positive thing for me. So that's why I support it so much, and I think it's great for families and great for kids. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. And it'd be one thing if we could guarantee that the children that might potentially be on the roads are parented by folks like you. But that's something that we just can't guarantee. And I'll tell you, I work in the construction field, and I work around a lot of moving parts, heavy equipment. It's very dangerous. And I'll tell you what, the most dangerous thing that I do in a day is drive to and from work. So we have to keep that in mind. And I just, like I said before, a valid driver's license is something that is going to be a sticking point for me, and I'm not going to move off of it. So thank you.
The part of this ordinance that I'm looking at that I really do like is number 5, ATV, UTV routes established pursuant to this ordinance shall be reviewed annually by the Public Works Committee to consider the continued value, efficacy, and need for the ATV, UTV routes, as well as the inclusion, exclusion of road routes pursuant to and in accordance with the purpose of this ordinance. Basically, that means we'll look at it once a year and see if it's still, we're doing what we would like to see it do. So there's somewhat of a sunset clause involved. To me, that's a positive. I'm definitely for the driver's license and insurance. That's a must-have.
All right. Anyone else? Hearing none, what are the committee's wishes?
I would like to make a motion to approve the drafted ordinance in attachment 3 with an additional restriction for all operators to have a valid driver's license and present such document upon request from law enforcement officers, as well as having staff review.
Okay, we have a motion. I'll second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to vote. All in favor respond with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Item 6, review the referral list.
Can I just go backwards for a minute, Maddie, because you might have turned your head because I was writing.
Sorry.
You said attachment number 3? Plus
Correct.
the valid driver's license, and then I think there was a second thing.
With staff review. I would like our Attorney Schill to review it.
So it was just to have addition of a valid driver's license and then review by staff.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Any additions or corrections to the referral list? Hearing none. We'll move on to our last agenda, or we'll set the next meeting date first, which looks to be Thursday, February 6th at 5 p.m. Council chambers should be available. Is that good with the committee? Okay. And then item 8, adjournment. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.